Hey, good afternoon to you. 306 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Will Scharf will be with us at 4 o'clock, a former federal prosecutor. He'll weigh in on what's going on in Georgia as Fanni Willis, well, her case against Trump is going down in flames. We'll talk to Will about it. Philip Wegman is here at 4:30 from Real Clear Politics. He's the White House correspondent there. We'll get some insight into what he thinks is happening today in those Iowa caucuses set for this evening. People gathering inside of common rooms all across the state of Iowa to decide who they prefer to be the Republican nominee. And Keith Kellogg, the general, will be with us at 5 o'clock today. We'll talk to him about the newly declared, publicly discussed coup against a future President Trump. Keith Kellogg will react. And we'll talk to you at 888-630-9625. 888-630-WMAL. Always grateful for your contributions. I can't believe it. We're here. We're finally off. It is Iowa Caucus Day. And, boy, you know, judging by the polls, this is really not much of a contest. I guess we'll see tonight. There could be some surprises here. But you look at all of these surveys, they definitely show Donald Trump up by 30, 40 points. And places like CNN and MSNBC marveling at the numbers this morning, saying that, boy, it looks like this is over. Well, yeah, no kidding. I mean, if you've been watching this for months, it certainly would seem that way. Ron DeSantis, remember, came in with somewhat of a head of steam, never eclipsing Donald Trump, but he has lost some support in the meantime. And right now, to the extent that there's an anti-Trump candidate in particular, that is Nikki Haley. That's the protest vote, it appears. And Nikki Haley hoping to have a big night in Iowa. But again, to what end? To what end? And will we see candidates for president drop out in the days ahead? It is not a cheap thing to run for president. It is immensely expensive. And I don't care if you're as wealthy as Donald Trump or Vivek Ramaswamy. You don't want to be bleeding hundreds of thousands of dollars a week just traveling and staying at places and buying things and setting up sets and cameras and planning out all these events, paying all these consultants, running all these ads. It's an expensive gambit, and it can only go on so long. I think back to Rick Santorum's win. Now, years ago, 2012, he wins the Iowa caucuses. They bootstrapped that entire thing. They were practically hitchhiking across the state of Iowa to try and get in front of every single one of these counties, every single one of these districts, and they won it with some success. But in the end, Rick Santorum, of course, did not become the nominee. Republicans rarely use Iowa or rely on Iowa as the vehicle through which they pick their nominee in the end. It actually almost never happens. It's much more of a Democrat phenomenon, actually, in Iowa, but not among Republicans. So it is great, though. It's a great state with, I think, great people. It is a really neat electoral process. These Iowa residents get a tremendous amount of face time. New Hampshire gets this too, a tremendous amount of face time with all the candidates. They really get to meet them. And in the age of these cell phone videos, you do get to see them yourselves, right? The videos get around. You kind of get a sense of who the candidate is, how they mix it up, how they handle live questioning. And I think it's just a neat reflection of who we are as a country. It's a cool process to watch. And then tonight in those caucuses, what'll happen is you'll get bunch of people from the community will all crowd into, say, a gymnasium. They'll sit there in the stands, and then they'll listen to speech after speech after speech from the person who represents the campaign. So the campaigns try to make sure that they have a representative at every possible caucus across the state. If they don't have a representative, typically a volunteer from the crowd will say, okay, I'm representing Vivek Ramaswamy. Okay, that person will give the speech. And they'll give a speech for a few minutes, trying to argue why everyone in the room should support that person. And then they all go and they all cast their ballots. So it's a very neat process to see in person. I got to see it back in 2016. Very energized room, and people very excited to participate in it. And I don't think there's been a lot of predictions here. This is the other big thing we'll find out about, and you can't even do it now. We really can't because they haven't even begun the caucuses. But turnout, what will that look like? A lot of words spent on over the weekend saying that, turnout's going to be really low because it's going to be cold. And yeah, it's very cold in Iowa today. Below freezing temperatures today and very strong winds. It's a biting cold, they say. And The New York Times with a headline today that it is the coldest in history. The sub-zero temperatures are set to make Iowa's caucuses the coldest in history today. Temperatures are not forecast to rise above -2 at any point today. So the high would be -2 by the time caucusing begins this evening. So very cold. But Iowans handle this. They definitely handle the cold. They've got the vehicles for it and the enthusiasm for it. That's for sure. That's for sure. The New York Times, I should point out, has had a couple of funny headlines lately about snow, and we're experiencing it right here in our area, of course, today. And please be safe on the roadways. I was out early this morning, and I saw 3 accidents just in my short trip to take my daughter to her swim practice. And, oh, my gosh. And I'm looking, and, of course, it's like a sports car, some little Japanese sports car spun out on the side of the road. Everybody looks like they were safe. Not a catastrophic accident or anything, but I'm like, hey, man, don't take the corners that hard in your 2-wheel drive vehicle. Slow down in this snow while it's on the ground. And the New York Times has these headlines just in the last 2 weeks. In 2 weeks' time, you ready for the way the headlines have evolved? They've been talking about snow and global warming and the impact that they have. January 2nd, they wrote a piece called "The End of Snow." How global warming was going to make it so that we don't have any snow anymore. We're almost there. We're not going to have snow ever again. January 10th, climate change is driving a sharp drop in snow levels, study finds. January 12th, how can a warming climate increase snowfall? So, what's funny about these New York Times headlines? It's like if you're debating with your friends, like, this is also crazy. They literally have a New York Times headline from just the past 2 weeks that they can use to fight back against you. When you're like, hey, the climate change stuff is crazy. It wouldn't increase snow. And then they send you a headline. You're like, well, the New York Times says it can increase snow. You're like, snow's not disappearing. Well, the New York Times says snow is disappearing. They have it every way. It's not just both ways. It's every possible way. They've got a headline to cover it. Yep. So Iowa. Also, one more thing on the Iowa stuff for now. I have noticed leading up to today, to this moment, and this may be a very online phenomenon. You may not be experiencing this in your personal life. My guess is you're not. But on the internet, there are Republican supporters of each of the respective candidates, mostly DeSantis, Trump, and maybe some Vivek. The Nikki Haley thing is like a whole nother conversation. But among those first 3, there are supporters for each of them who are really angry at all of the other ones. And I get it. You have a horse in this race. You're backing a guy. You've been supporting him throughout this race. You'd like to see him prevail. And tonight is the big night, right? This is the one you've been waiting for, or New Hampshire, but probably tonight. Unless you're like a Christie or Nikki Haley person. You were waiting for New Hampshire, and Christie's out. Sorry about that. And so emotions are very high right now. And people are sniping and backbiting and attacking each other. Heck, of course, the candidates are doing it to each other now. Trump routinely has done this. Back in 2016, he did it. He's doing it again now. Remember at one point, Trump said that Ted Cruz's father was likely involved in the assassination of John F. Kennedy. There were moments, no question, in 2016. But the one thing I just would remind anyone who is tempted by these attacks against your fellow Republican, remember, at some point, we're going to have to all come back together after this. And I think we will. I think by and large, I don't think that the rifts are that great, that people won't be able to overcome them. I have seen some people say, I will never vote for Trump. I couldn't in a million years. Really? I'm going to vote third party. I'm going to write in my own name. Oh, so your goal is to get Joe Biden reelected? Is that what you're telling me? No. I just can't support Trump. Okay, so again, you think the world would be better if Joe Biden wins by 1 vote? Are you going to be happy with that? You're going to be very comfortable with your third party stand? Stop being ridiculous. It's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, the country is so much worse off. It's not even close. I don't even know why I need to describe this to you. Wake up. Knock on their forehead. Wake up. Come on. But it'll pass. This too shall pass, I think. I think people will come together. Because, boy, we have to. We have a country worth saving, don't we? Borders are falling apart. The economy is falling apart. We have millions of people who shouldn't be here, just strangers pouring into the country, invading, aided and abetted by Joe Biden and everyone around him. The president's completely senile. being exploited. It's crazy. It's upsetting. How many wars has Joe Biden started since he's been president of the United States? I feel like we have a few more going on at the same time, right? We're either running proxy wars or directly engaged in them. Things that were not true under Donald Trump. Yeah, that's a huge issue. That's a huge issue. And so the Iowa caucuses they're important for sure. It's a date on the political calendar that every election cycle we look forward to and we say, okay, now it begins. But that is the realm of, in many ways, it's kind of like, it's a nostalgic feeling, isn't it? Like, it's like, this is what politics was like before the Iowa caucuses. This is when it all starts. Meanwhile, the left is playing in the most disgusting possible way. They're rigging the election before our very eyes. They don't even really fundamentally care who wins these caucuses, who becomes the nominee. If anything, they're kind of hoping Trump does, in a way. They've got this really sick and twisted view of all of this. Of course, you've got people on the right who really want Trump to win. You have people on the left who think that, well, maybe if Trump wins, maybe we can re-engineer exactly what happened in 2020. So there's that meddling, right? They thought slapping him with 90-something charges would be the reason that he prevails in the primary and then loses in the general. But they're willing to stop at nothing. And now they're freaking out about him simultaneously, even being on primary ballots. They've been trying to banish him from Republican primary ballots in places like Colorado and Maine and a lot of other states. And subsequently, of course, the general election. They want to banish him from the ballot. They're not believers of democracy. They have contempt for the democratic system. They hate that the voters get a say that doesn't include making Democrats the permanent power holders. They despise it. So they'll work overtime to prevent it. You heard Joy Behar say it on The View recently. And let the voters decide? No, she said. I believe I'm quoting her verbatim, by the way. That is not even close to a paraphrase. And let the voters decide? No, she says. So what you have is a party that hates our republic, our democratic system. And then on the other side, you have a party that's fighting amongst themselves about who should be the nominee, but fundamentally that's already been decided by the voters, despite what Washington Republicans may think or desire. And so the caucuses are a useful reminder that there is a good country underneath all of this nonsense, where people feel like they do have a responsibility to vote, to test the candidates, to kick the tires, to choose who's going to best represent them, and to figure out who's going to help their families, who's going to stay out of their lives, who's going to get the government out of their lives. That country still exists, and we should fight tooth and nail to defend it. We should uphold our traditions. We should take seriously our obligations. We should be serious about who our leaders are and make sure to empower the right people. And so the Iowa caucuses to me are just they're a very welcome event on the calendar. They are. I like that we're doing this. And it's the antidote to the merchants of chaos who are trying to disrupt all of it. You know what? No, you're not going to disrupt my pattern. We're going to do it. We're going to do the Iowa caucuses. We're going to have the vote. We're going to choose a nominee. You stay out of this. We'll get to you. And the last point on this, for now. One of the things I was disappointed with in this Republican primary is the hesitancy that too many of the candidates had in the field to stand up against injustice when it came to the tyranny of the Biden administration, the Justice Department, and every other component training its fire on people who would dare vote for the other side, vote for Republicans. Specifically Donald Trump, but broadly for Republicans across the country. Like Chris Christie's campaign was moronic for not attacking that. Imagine, I mean, you know, there are people out there who don't like Trump, fine. And Christie was trying to represent them. But he should have really been focused, if he really was running a real campaign, not just a kamikaze, which of course in the end he was, he would have focused on the corruption of the Justice Department, the out-of-control FBI, demonstrated some just basically come out and apologized for recommending Christopher Wray to run the FBI. It's been a complete disaster. And any one of these other candidates, I mean, Ron DeSantis was doing a lot of finger to the wind, on this. How do I respond to this? And he got a little bit better as each injustice came. He would release a different press release, but fighting back against this tyranny is right there at the top of the list. And restructuring our country in such a way that the voter is considered the most important. And not just some servant in this system, not just a subject of it. So it's a big day. It's a really big day. Also, the election interference story, I've got a lot to share with you because especially that case out of Georgia, it does look like the whole thing's collapsing. It does. Big fat Fanni Willis went to the pulpit this weekend and was complaining that if you criticize her, you're a racist, obviously. But she said something that seems to be so flatly untrue that it looks like she's got a real case going on of a criminal enterprise. Her, not the charges. She dropped charges on Trump. She's charging him with running a criminal enterprise. She is running what appears to be racketeering right now. An organized criminal fraud. Hey, good afternoon to you. 3:36 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up in the program, 4 o'clock, we're going to talk to Will Scharf about what's happening with Fanni Willis in Georgia. A wild saga. Turns out a crazy woman is trying to destroy Donald Trump. Luckily for us, she's publicly crazy, so maybe that'll destroy the whole process. Philip Wegman is coming up at 4:30 from Real Clear Politics. We'll get the latest out of Iowa with Philip. And then Keith Kellogg is here at 5 o'clock. The general will talk to us about one of the left's many plans to not only stop Trump, but to disable him should he become president of the United States again. Now openly planning a coup against him. Insurrection, anyone? You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Yeah, it's supposed to be a slow day. What's going on? MLK Day is supposed to be, what are we going to talk about? Just give you updates on the latest MLK celebration today. No, we've got a lot more to talk about than that. Amazing. Although I will say, it was funny. Kamala Harris was at an MLK event today. And, of course, if you're going to honor Martin Luther King, you may want to say something maybe original or novel. No, Kamala whipped out an oldie but a baddie.
Today, we celebrate the legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., a visionary who saw what could be unburdened by what had been.
No, not that line. Come on. Don't we pay people to write for her? Don't we, the American taxpayer, pay someone too much money a year to write original content for her? What? And the irony of this, there are many ironies. One, she's just copying herself. And then, of course, I guess whoever she stole that from in the first place. Her relationship with Martin Luther King materials, she plagiarizes him. Remember when she told that story about when she was a little girl and her mom asked her what she wanted and she said, freedom! She stole that from Martin Luther King. It was an MLK Jr. story that he relayed that she stole and pretended it was her own biography. I yelled, freedom! No, you didn't. It's a lie. You just plagiarized an MLK story. By the way, also, MLK had some plagiarism in his own past as well. But we don't measure people by their lowest moments. We measure people by what they achieve. And MLK certainly achieved a lot more than the plagiarism he may have committed. Kamala, what has she achieved? I mean, it's a miracle she became vice president, so there you go. Personal achievement. But you can't change the speech up at all. It's the same one she's given a million times. This is just a small supercut of it.
I can imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been. You know?
What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened
by what has been.
Now, missing from this, because we're on radio, is there's also a hand movement. It's kind of like the Macarena. It's the same every time she raises a hand, what can be unburdened, and then she throws the hand out to the side by what has been. Like she's casting a spell or something, or, or directing a choir. It's what can be unburdened by what has been. It goes off to the side. There's the same hand movement every time.
We can see what we believe can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
Let me just pause on, if I'm going to take her seriously for a moment, the substance of this. So that basically, I guess what she's trying to say is that we should all be visionaries, that we should look forward to what can be, as she might say, unburdened by what has been. Is that the story of her party? Is that the story of the modern Democrat? That they are, quote, unburdened by what has been? Because it seems to me that everything about them is, we're so burdened by what has been. Like, the entire reason to be a Democrat is because you're burdened by what has been. And by what has been is not even really a historic reference. It's literally, a lot of it's just fiction. It's stuff that you made up or someone around you made up, and now you're burdened by it. I've been burdened by this. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's everything about this is a lie, and it's like so repetitive.
We can be unburdened by who we have been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
Where we can be unburdened by where we have been and unburdened by where we are right now.
What can be
There's a little variation.
unburdened by what has been.
Okay. Anyway, the Republican National Committee had a supercut, and we borrowed it. We appropriated it for your listening pleasure. That's Kamala Harris. She's amazing, isn't she? Also amazing, big fat Fanni Willis down in Georgia. She is, looks like her case is practically falling apart. We'll see. The Washington Post is freaking out about this today. Yeah, that's a sign. If the Washington Post is freaking out about your left-wing scheme, there are problems. For sure. The Washington Post today, headline, Nathan Wade, embattled prosecutor in Georgia Trump case, has little prosecution experience. Nathan Wade, we should immediately point out, is Fanni Willis's boy toy, who she's been paying a lot of money from taxpayers, a lot. Between the two of them, over these last 2 years, they made somewhere north of $1 million together, and they've spent a lot of it on very fancy trips. So she hired this Nathan Wade character, and there was no reason to hire him. His biography did not suggest in any way that he should be a special prosecutor in a racketeering case. On the highest profile case, certainly of his life, but definitely one of the highest profile cases in the country. Why would Nathan Wade be the guy? So they write, in the fall of 2021, Nathan Wade had little experience prosecuting criminal cases in the Atlanta area, serving as a municipal judge who mostly dealt with traffic tickets and running a private practice that focuses on family law and contract disputes. Then Fulton County District Attorney Fanni Willis tapped him to lead the biggest case of her career, a 2.5-year investigation that led to charges against former President Donald Trump and more than a dozen co-defendants, alleging that they legally conspired to try to overturn the 2020 election in Georgia. Willis's decision to hire Wade is now facing enormous scrutiny after one of Trump's co-defendants alleged in a court filing last week that the two prosecutors are actually lovers who have vacationed together on Wade's dime. The Washington Post leaves out this is coming from taxpayer money. In Napa Valley and the Caribbean. The accusations, if true, could present a conflict of interest or could amount to fraud. How about that? The filing contains no proof to substantiate the sensational allegations, they say. But the episode has drawn attention to an arrangement in which Willis's office hired an outside attorney and paid his firm more than $650,000 over 2 years to lead a criminal investigation typically managed by civil servants. It also reflects the intense scrutiny facing prosecutors who are seeking to convict a former U.S. president and his allies, leaving little margin for error as their detractors look for any opportunity to scuttle the case. This is hilarious. This is like, remember when the Harvard lady, Claudine Gay, who just pretended to leave Harvard. She still works at Harvard. She's still making $1 million a year. But she doesn't have the title of president anymore, or at least she was resigning. She was in the process of that. And in her case, remember that the media made defenses for her rampant plagiarism. They just called it duplicative language. It was just duplicative language. Everybody's guilty of a little duplicative language, you know? Namely Kamala Harris. Duplicative language. So they just made excuses. Here, the Washington Post is saying this is deeply troubling, what's going on here. That Fanni Willis's boyfriend is making all this money. But also, this is a story of how Republicans are going to scrutinize every little wrinkle. And they've called that a wrinkle here. And so you got to be careful not to have too many wrinkles. So they go on to talk about how this became public, of course. It's a Trump campaign aide, a former Trump campaign aide named Mike Roman. Roman is the co-defendant who alleged the improper relationship, and he wants the entire prosecution team disqualified and the charges dismissed. Other co-defendants, including Trump, are weighing whether to sign on to the pleading. The judge who's overseeing the case said Friday that he plans to schedule a hearing on these claims next month. So we'll get a hearing next month on the corruption in the Fanni Willis case. A close examination of Wade's legal career, as well as interviews with those who have known him for years, reveals a respected attorney, active in public life in Marietta, a northern Atlanta suburb where he lives, but one with little experience comparable to the Trump case. Later in the piece, they say here, Roman asserted in his filing that Willis, that's Fanni Willis, has benefited personally from Wade's compensation, which has been near $650,000 or something. It's up there. It's in that vicinity. That she has benefited personally from the compensation, claiming, for example, that she joined him in multiple cruises and other trips that he paid for. That could amount to an act of fraud or an impermissible conflict of interest under Georgia's rules of professional conduct. Quote, the district attorney's apparent intentional failure to disclose her conflict of interest to Fulton County and the court, combined with her decision to employ the special prosecutor based on her own personal interests, may be well an act to defraud the public of honest services, since the district attorney personally benefited from an undisclosed conflict of interest, which is a federal crime, Roman's filing states. It could even result in a racketeering charge against her, Fanni Willis, the filing claims, which is the same crime that she charged Trump and his co-defendants with. How about it? So in every single one of these cases, almost every single one that I can think of, all of these scandals that the left is constantly cooking up, how often are they just cases of projection, where they're actually guilty of the thing that they're alleging that their political opponents have done? Oh, Fanni Willis is in the midst of a criminal conspiracy right now to take down Trump and to defraud the public and to pay off her boyfriend and to go on fancy trips on their dime. Now, Fanni Willis has mostly said nothing about this. She's tried to keep her head down. She was hoping the media wouldn't cover it with any aggression at all. She was hoping that even the Washington Post wouldn't cover it. And certainly the Washington Post does have a piece on the subject now, although they try and minimize this scandal at times. But Fanni Willis, over the weekend, finally did have something to say. And so she decided to do it at Big Bethel AME Church. She went and spoke to a Black American congregation. You'll notice in this audio, she changes her cadence from the way she usually speaks. So she's Phony Willis, too. And here she is saying it's racism. It's racism to scrutinize her.
You cannot expect Black women to be perfect and save the world.
We all make mistakes.
The Lord is completing us. We are not perfect.
She's actively stealing millions of dollars.
We need your prayers. We need to be allowed to stumble. We need grace.
We got to stumble into Cancun. We have to stumble into, the Virgin Islands. We stumble everywhere.
With that kind of support, we will move mountains and do Jesus' will. Stumbling all the way.
Oh, spare me. So there's a lot here. One is, once again, politics from the pulpit. The left loves doing that. The left loves it. This is they're constantly telling a separation of church and state, and then they're giving their big political speeches at the pulpit at Sunday service. Come on, please. And then she stands up there, she's like, look, we all make mistakes. We all make mistakes. We all steal millions of dollars. We all do that, don't we? Looking for an amen. People, I wonder how many people in the room are actually like, I can't amen this. This is crazy. This is crazy what I'm hearing. And it didn't stop there. Now, Fanni Willis, she made a claim during this that these special prosecutors she hired, to include her boyfriend, she didn't name him, but they were all paid the same. And the only person who's being scrutinized here and targeted is the black man, she says. Once again, alleging that it's racism. But listen to the claim she makes, because I'm about to share with you some information that demonstrates that this is an explicit lie.
But dear God, are you listening? Why does Commissioner Thorne and so many others question my decision in a special counsel? Lord, you're flawed, hard-headed, and imperfect child. I'm a little confused. I appointed 3 special counsel, as is my right to do. Paid them all the same hourly rate. They only attacked one. I hired one white woman, a good personal friend and great lawyer. A superstar, I tell you. I hired one white man, brilliant, my friend, and a great lawyer. And I hired one black man, another superstar, a great friend, and a great lawyer. Oh Lord, they gonna be mad when I call them out on this nonsense. First thing they say, oh, she gonna play the race card now. But no, God, isn't it them who's playing the race card when they only question one? Isn't it them playing the race card when they constantly think, I need someone from some other jurisdiction in some other state to tell me how to do a job I've been doing almost 30 years. God, why don't they look at...
Yeah, all right. Well, in a moment, I'm going to share with you why she was lying there explicitly. She said she hired just one black man, 3 special prosecutors, paid them all the same. Details in a moment. 3.
I appointed 3 special counsel, as is my right to do. Paid them all the same hourly rate. They only attacked one.
Oh, interesting. She said she hired 3, paid them all the same rate. They only attacked one. It was the black guy, she said. Is that true? No, it's not. She paid her boyfriend, Nathan Wade, $250 per hour to work for the Fulton County District Attorney's Office. Guess what she paid the actual expert on racketeering, a guy by the name of John Floyd? The Daily Caller News Foundation, with an exclusive report today, she hired him for $150 an hour. So the actual expert on the subject, $150. Her boyfriend she goes on tropical vacations with, $250 per hour. She lied, and she did it from the pulpit. It's amazing, isn't it? And typical. Coming up, Will Scharf joins us, former federal prosecutor and a candidate for attorney general in Missouri. We'll talk to him about this very saga.